Welcome to my channel. Today, I will be reading Something is Growing in the Tree Where We Buried Our Daughter. It has her face. Creepypasta. So let's jump into it. This happened many years ago. I was maybe 8 or 9 years old at the time. I live in the southern United States, and we have always had family plots in a cemetery in town. My great-grandfather was actually one of the founding fathers of our city, and so we have some really old headstones out there. But every morning they would come outside and find that it had pushed itself up through the concrete, the roots finding new ways to attach to the headstone and wrap around the tree. The vine had grown long tendrils that reached across the entire street. Some of these tendrils had grown long enough to wrap around the power lines and pull them down. Others had wrapped around the mailbox and pulled it from the ground. They were able to cut it up and remove the pieces without it fighting back. My aunt had always worn this locket, but it was supposed to be locked in the coffin with her. How did it end up here? What happened to her body? We don't know. Its leaves turned brown and shriveled up and fell to the ground. The branches, which had been so full of life just days before, now hung limp and lifeless. The tree was dead. Also, check out these related creepypastas. And as my dad stood there watching, he noticed that the face of the tree seemed to match the face of the flower, and it almost looked as if it were crying. To this day, the only marker at her grave is a small headstone that reads, "Beloved Aunt," and sometimes at night if you listen closely, you can hear the sound of its weeping. That is something that is growing in the tree where we buried our daughter. It has her face. Creepypasta. Her real headstone is still standing, but it has been defaced beyond recognition by that monstrous plant. The vine creature never touched it though. Why? Once it was gone, my dad decided to finally dig up my aunt's coffin and rebury it properly in the family plot with my grandparents. But when he finally pried up the coffin, it was empty. All that was inside was a pile of dirt and a small wooden box. He opened the box and found my aunt's locket. It was a silver locket that had been in my grandmother's family for generations. Still, others had wrapped around cars and crushed them as if they were made of eggshells. It had become a massive, sentient, angry creature that was slowly poisoning our town. The last thing that grew from that monstrous vine was a single white flower. It sprouted at the top of the vine, right where the tendrils had beaten against the tree, and it was beautiful, almost alien-like in its beauty. And, as my dad stood there staring at it, he noticed that the petals of the flower looked exactly like my aunt's face. But the scariest part was that it had grown in the shape of a woman's face. Looking at it from the side, it almost looked as if it were smiling at him, and as he stared at it, it seemed to wink. Everyone was afraid of the plant and no one knew what to do with it. As the weeks went by, the vine continued to grow thicker and larger. "I've never seen a plant grow so fast," he said. "And, whatever this is, it's not native to our area. I think it may have been growing underground for years before it finally sprouted." He tried to burn it, but it just caused the tendrils to grow faster and become stronger. He tried to poison it, but it seemed to relish in the poison, growing even thicker and larger after being sprayed. Eventually it grew so large that it blocked the road in front of our house. People saw it moving at night, tendrils slithering across the ground like giant snakes. One night, my parents heard screams in the middle of the night. When they got up to investigate, they saw that the creature had taken several of its tendrils and was beating them against the tree as if trying to climb it. Then it would fall silent until the next night, when it would scream and thrash about again. It kept doing this until one morning they found that the creature had stopped moving altogether. My parents had to start taking alternate routes to work, and because the road was a major thoroughfare in our city, eventually the local municipality had to come and cut down the vine so that traffic could pass again. But it was too late. They dug up the headstone and found that the vine had already wrapped itself completely around the coffin. They tried to dig up the coffin and move it, but it was no use. The vine had sunk its roots deep into the ground and wouldn't budge. Whatever this thing was, it seemed to be attached to the coffin, as if it were trying to keep it there. My parents had to leave it alone because they didn't want to disturb it more than they already had. On one side of our family plot is a large oak tree. At least 20 feet from the tree on the other side are 3 newer headstones. These are my grandparents and my aunt. Unfortunately, all 3 passed away within a year of each other, with my grandparents passing just a few months apart after my aunt died. My parents decided to bury me there next to my aunt and grandparents once they pass away. Now, if you have ever been to the South, you know that we don't take too kindly to people messing with our dead. She called my dad over, and he was furious. "What the hell is this?" he said. It was a vine of some sort that was thick as my arm and wrapped around the base of the headstone. The 2 ends of the vine were growing towards the tree and wrapping themselves around its roots. There were also strange protrusions growing out of the middle of the vine that looked like hands reaching towards the tree. And so, even though my aunt was only buried about 6 months before my grandparents, my dad still made her move to the front of the headstone, so that she was and so far from him and Mum. After all, she was still family, and it would just look better. This left only a couple of feet between the tree and her headstone. One day in early spring when I was very young, my mum came outside and noticed something growing at the base of the tree where my aunt had been buried. At this point, my mum and dad started to get scared. They decided to cover the vine with concrete to kill it. The damage had already been done. The local arborist came out to try and identify it, but even he had never seen anything like it before. As it grew, it began to take on a life of its own. It had taken one final breath and died. On the back of the locket was an inscription that read, "Until we meet again." That's where things get creepy. And then it disappeared. And as quickly as it had grown, the entire tree began to wither. It's been years since then, but the tree still stands in our front yard, bare and lifeless, forever bearing the face of the monster that lived within it. If you liked this creepypasta, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content.